So let's talk about a piece of technology called PGT-A. It's this cutting-edge test that's presented as a total game changer for anyone going through IVF. The promise is huge. Make sure only the very best embryos are used. It sounds amazing, right? But is that the whole story? You see, while a lot of clinics are pushing it as this essential tool for success, a growing number of experts are asking a very different question. They're asking if it's actually risky, unnecessary, and wasteful. Okay, let's get into it and figure out what's really going on behind all the hype. So, first things first, what even is PGTA? Well, think of it as an expensive add-on to your IVF cycle. The basic idea is that a lab will take a tiny sample from each of your embryos, test them for genetic issues, and then only transfer the ones that are supposedly genetically perfect. I mean, the promise here is incredibly powerful. Better success rates in preventing conditions like Down syndrome. It sounds like the ultimate safety check. Now, to really get why this test is so incredibly popular, it helps to look at a specific place, like Malaysia. It turns out there's a unique mix of pressures there that makes PGT-A seem like the absolute perfect solution for so many hopeful parents. In Malaysia, you've got this perfect storm of factors. You have very strict laws around abortion, which are supported by really strong religious and moral beliefs. On top of that, there's a serious social stigma that can come with having a child with a congenital defect. And at the exact same time, people are more aware than ever about age-related genetic risks, and they're having smaller families, so they're pouring everything they have into that one child. When you put all that together, a test that promises to screen for problems before you even get pregnant, well, it stops feeling like an option and starts feeling like an absolute necessity. But, and this is a big but, that peace of mind comes with a hefty price tag. Adding PGT-A to your IVF can jack up the total cost by a massive 20 to 30%. And for a treatment that's already unbelievably expensive, that just raises the stakes, both financially and emotionally, through the roof. Which brings us to the million-dollar question. Does the test actually do what it says it does? This is where things get really interesting. Let's stack up the marketing promises against what the science actually says. Okay, so the number one claim, the main selling point for PGT-A, is super simple. It will boost your chances of having a baby. But here's the thing. When you dig into the evidence from multiple, huge international studies, the conclusion is crystal clear. It does not significantly improve your odds of taking home a baby. And listen, we're not talking about a few small, obscure studies here. We are talking about the big guns. The ESTEEM trial, the STAR trial, a massive study from 2021 published in the super prestigious New England Journal of Medicine, and a gigantic analysis of over 133,000 IVF cycles. They all came to the same conclusion. The promised benefit just wasn't there. But actually, wait, it gets worse. It's not just that it doesn't help. That enormous analysis of all those IVF cycles found that for patients under the age of 35, using PGT-A was linked to a lower live birth rate. Just let that sink in. The very test that's supposed to help could actually be hurting your chances. And this isn't just theoretical. These inaccuracies have devastating real-world consequences. Just look at Australia, where a major clinic, Monash IVF, had to pay out 56 million Australian dollars to its former patients. Why? Because the clinic's faulty genetic testing led them to throw away healthy embryos, literally destroying people's chances of ever having a family. So you're probably asking, how on earth can a high-tech scientific test be so wrong? It's a fair question. Let's pull back the curtain and look at exactly how this test can fail and what the hidden risks really are. First off, you have to understand how they even do this test. It's not a gentle process. A lab technician has to physically pluck a few cells out of this tiny 5-day-old embryo. And that procedure, that biopsy, can actually damage the embryo and mess with its ability to grow. And that risk is even higher for the kind of lower quality embryos that older women, the very people who are told they need this test the most, often produce. But this, right here, this might be the single biggest flaw in the whole system. Look at what they're actually testing. The lab takes cells from the outer layer of the embryo, the part that becomes the placenta. They do not test the inner part, the little bundle of cells that grows into the actual baby. Think about that for a second. The biggest decision of the entire process, whether to keep or discard an embryo, is being made based on the genetics of the future placenta, not the future fetus. And why does that matter so much?
Well, it's because of a biological phenomenon called mosaicism. Now, stick with me, because this is a super important idea. It turns out that it's extremely common for early embryos to be mosaic, which just means they have a mix of both genetically normal cells and abnormal cells. They aren't all one or the other.
So because PGT-A is just testing a few cells from that outer placenta layer, it can get a totally skewed picture. If the sample they grab happens to have some of those abnormal cells, the entire embryo gets labeled abnormal and is thrown out. And that is the most heartbreaking part of all this. Countless viable embryos that could have grown into perfectly healthy babies are being discarded. What the test completely fails to account for is the embryo's incredible natural ability to self-correct. It's amazing, really. We now know that many of these mosaic embryos can essentially heal themselves. They push the abnormal cells out to the placenta layer, leaving the healthy cells to form the baby. By throwing these embryos away, clinics are basically overwriting nature's own correction system and torpedoing a patient's chances of success. Okay, so after all of that, what are you supposed to do with this information? This brings us to the most important part, what every single patient should know to become their own best advocate in this journey. Right, so what does this actually mean for you when you're sitting in that doctor's office feeling overwhelmed and having to make these massive decisions? Let's just do a super quick rundown of the key problems. Let's look at PGT-A. Is it effective? The top regulators in the UK and the US say they don't recommend it for everybody. Is it safe? Well, we know the biopsy itself can damage fragile embryos. What about accuracy? It tests the placenta, not the baby, which means there's a huge risk of misdiagnosis. And the final outcome? You might be throwing away perfectly good embryos that could have become your baby. So it's really no surprise that the advice from experts who have dug into this is pretty blunt. They say, think twice before choosing to add on this highly expensive technique. That's a pretty clear warning, right? So what's a better way forward? Well, one powerful idea that's gaining a lot of traction is to make it mandatory for every IVF patient to get counseling from a certified, independent genetic counselor. You know, someone whose job isn't to sell you the test, but to sit down and honestly explain all the risks, the limitations, and the scientific doubts so that you can make a truly informed choice. And at the end of the day, that's what this all boils down to. So we'll leave you with this one critical question to carry with you, a question you should ask yourself and your doctors. Are you really being given all the facts you need to make the best possible choice for your family?